Welcome to this explainer. You know, if you've ever stopped and wondered about the invisible, hyper-complex mechanics operating behind the digital screens we stare at all day, you are absolutely in the right place. Today, we're going to unpack the sheer scale of big data and look at how it actually gets transformed into tangible financial value. We're zeroing in on Google's architecture, breaking down exactly how an almost overwhelming ocean of information gets refined into targeted advertising. Let's dive right in.
Okay, so here is our quick roadmap for today. We'll be looking at the big data advertising link, monetizing through architecture, taking a look at Google, and finally, the case study approach. So we have to start with this absolutely foundational question. How exactly is big data used to create advertising opportunities? I want you to really let that sink in for a second. We aren't just talking about collecting data for the sake of hoarding it. No, we're exploring the deliberate, highly calculated process of taking billions of daily search queries, location pings, and browsing habits, and turning them into highly specific moments where a business can connect with a consumer. This single question is the engine driving our entire exploration today. All right, let's jump into section 1, the big data advertising link. Think of it kind of like a giant puzzle. On one side, you have raw big data. It's vast, it's unstructured, and honestly, on its own, it can be incredibly chaotic. Then, way over on the other side, you have these highly refined advertising opportunities. Our goal is to demystify the space between those two extremes. We're looking at how you take something overwhelmingly large, literally petabytes of global user behavior, and engineer it into something precisely valuable for an advertiser. It's definitely not magic. It's a highly specific, engineered pipeline. Well, how does that transition actually happen? First up, you have to manage those massive information inputs. That means using complex algorithms to sort and categorize billions of daily interactions. But just having data isn't enough, which leads us right into the second step, the identification of opportunities. This is where the real analysis comes in, finding keyword triggers, mapping demographics, and detecting buying signals through all the noise. Finally, that identification allows for the actual creation of ad value. This usually happens through real-time bidding platforms where advertisers purchase that exact fleeting moment of user attention. This three-step progression is exactly how abstract data becomes concrete revenue. Which perfectly sets up section 2, monetizing through architecture. Let's look at the actual structural framework that makes this all possible. Now, monetization, it's not just some corporate buzzword. In this context, it is the specific, deliberate process of extracting financial value by creating advertising opportunities directly from data. Basically, monetization is the verb, it's the action. It's the exact moment when those raw, categorized inputs we just talked about finally pay off. Because in the world of ad tech, data without monetization is, quite frankly, just a really expensive storage problem. The intense focus here is entirely on the extraction of that value. But here's the catch. To pull this off at that kind of scale, you need serious architecture. I mean, you can't just manually sort through billions of data points to find an ad opportunity, right? You need a robust underlying system built specifically to process big data efficiently. We are talking about massive data centers, hyper-fast servers, machine learning algorithms, and ad exchanges that operate in actual milliseconds. If monetization is the destination, this technical architecture is the incredibly powerful engine that gets you there. And when you combine all of that, the big data, the advertising, the monetization, and that massive system structure, there is literally no entity that represents the synthesis of these elements, quite like Google. Let's dive right into section 3, a look at Google. This is where the abstract concepts finally hit reality. Google is basically the ultimate lens for us to view this topic through. Because of their sheer, overwhelming market dominance and search volume, we don't even have to talk in hypotheticals. We get to look at a tangible, incredibly successful architecture that relies entirely on monetizing big data through advertising. They have essentially written the entire playbook on processing user intent, which makes them the absolute perfect real-world application for everything we're discussing. And our focus here is going to be laser sharp. We are looking exactly at how data is used in creating advertising opportunities within Google's walls. We aren't doing a general history of the company, and we're not getting sidetracked by their hardware divisions. It is all about the how. How is search query data utilized? And how are those tiny, fleeting moments of user interest packaged up and sold to advertisers in literal milliseconds? Because by isolating our focus to just one singular, comprehensive case study, we can drill down incredibly deep into the mechanics of big data without getting lost in all the noise. When you're dealing with topics as vast as global advertising architectures, getting that depth of understanding is way more valuable than just having a shallow breadth of knowledge.
So let's wrap things up with section 4, the case study approach.
To truly wrap our heads around this absolute beast of a machine, we have to follow a very logical step-by-step progression. First, step 1, we look at Google to establish our foundation and understand their core business model. Then, step 2, we actually trace how they use data, tracking search histories, content consumption, things like that. And finally, step 3, logically following that trail, we discover how those specific data points actually manifest into targeted advertising opportunities. Each step deliberately supports the next one. And look, by actively discussing and dissecting this case study together, we move way past passive reception. You aren't just sitting there absorbing facts, you're analyzing a living, breathing digital ecosystem. And it's that active analysis that unlocks a much, much deeper comprehension of the whole overarching topic. It perfectly bridges the gap between just knowing what a company does and actually understanding exactly how they pull it off. Because ultimately, dissecting this entire architecture allows us to, as the source material says, understand further on the big data and advertising. It pushes us right past a basic, surface-level familiarity with targeted ads and drops us into robust, applicable knowledge of the actual data infrastructure that powers the modern internet. So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to chew on. What actually happens when architecture and big data perfectly align to create monetization? Keep this in the back of your mind as you navigate the web today. Look for those friction points, look for the seamless integrations, and start really seeing how our digital economy is truly built from the data up. Thanks so much for joining me.